Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Mary Price. I'm the Events and Marketing Director at the Shingo Institute at Utah State University. Today, I'm excited to have two special guests with us, Chris Butterworth and Caroline Greenlee. Both are co-authors of the book Why Care, which we're discussing today. Chris will also be inducted into the Shingo Academy next month. He's been involved with the Shingo community for many, many years. Caroline has over 20 years experience as a continuous improvement coach, and I'm thrilled to be able to learn more from them today. This month's newsletter, which was sent out last week, featured an article written by them. It's titled Why Care? How Thriving Individuals Create Thriving Culture of Continuous Improvement Within Organizations. You can find that article on our website. Simply go to shingo.org, click the media tab, and select the blog. As a reminder, all of our monthly webinars can be found on our Shingo YouTube channel. They can also be listened to on the Shingo Principles podcast, and you can access those directly from our website as well under the media tab. With that, I'll turn the time over to Chris and Caroline.
Thank you, Mary. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm going to let Caroline introduce herself in a moment, but the two of us are very pleased to do our very first presentation on the Why Care book, which is, we had the email yesterday to advise us it's gone to the printers, so it will be out at the beginning of June. So without any further, I shall talk about the book. Right. So this is Caroline. Would you like to say hello?
Hi, folks. Good afternoon. Thanks for your time today.
And our colleague, co-author Chris Warner, can't be here because he lives in Australia and he's currently fast asleep. But we also would like to say thank you to all the various contributors to the book, and acknowledge all the help that we had. It took us a lot of research, a lot of hard work, and was a real labor of love to create this. And I think we all learned a lot as we went through it. So we're looking forward to sharing some of those things with you. And we want to, in the short time we have today, just outline how Why Care supports the Shingo model, some of the key insights and the context of the book. And one of the key messages in the book is to appreciate the power of the individual and why we need to start with an inside-out view. I will explain what that means. And to recognize the importance of proactively managing psychological well-being. And that's a key theme that runs throughout the book, and we'll explain a bit more about that. And then we'll also give you an overview of the implementation framework, because this is meant to be a very practical self-help book with lots of templates and lots of things that you can try for yourselves. And lots of links to the Shingo model. So I'll not pick all of these, but if you think about the principles and cultural enablers, respect every individual, lead with humility, underpin all the thinking in Why Care. We also have a big section on enterprise alignment, talking about the importance of aligning personal purpose with organizational purpose, and how critical it is to co-design the continuous improvement system with the psychological well-being system. So cover all of those. We also talk about, as I mentioned, those systems. We also talk about KBIs and KPIs and how those things need to come together to really create a culture where all individuals can thrive. So throughout the book, we make lots of reference to the Shingo model. The three high-level key insights is that a thriving culture of continuous improvement is essential for organizations to successfully respond to the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment that we're all facing today. And that environment is accelerating in all of those areas. And the only way to manage that is to tap into the potential of our people. And that's where we come from in terms of thriving individuals are needed to maintain a positive state of psychological well-being, unleashing the capacity to work on continuous improvement. What we've realized is that people are not able to contribute to continuous improvement unless we also have a strong focus on the psychological well-being. And to maximize the number of individuals that are thriving, we actually need to put assessments in place at all levels, at an individual level, a leader level, team level, and the organizational level. And those assessments help us to understand what people need in order to thrive and help us to see how we make sure the continuous improvement system and the well-being system are continuously improved in this plan, do, check, act cycle. Why some of the statistics around this are actually quite horrifying. This was a big global survey done just in 2023. 8% of respondents said that they would not wish their job on their worst enemy. 20% said the job negatively impacts their mental health. And 64% would take a pay cut for a job which better supports their mental wellness. And 81% said they prioritize good mental health over a high-paying job. Where we have that kind of environment, the chance of having continuous improvement is very low. It might happen with individuals, but it's not going to happen across the organization with those kind of figures in place. And if we're not focused on continuous improvement, we're at risk of not being able to respond to all these external demands that we're facing at the moment. The other fascinating thing we found was that it's not just about a particular generation. It's something that applies across all generations. With millennials and Gen Z, 70% of employees said they would trade in that well-paying job for better mental health, and high percentage of Gen X and Boomers as well. So this is something that applies to the entire workforce, and it's critical to focus on. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Caroline and let her explain some of the key insights that we've come with.
Chris, one of the things that we found when we were doing the research for the book is that there's a real mismatch between what science knows and what business does. And if you look on the left-hand side here, we've got a little 4-layer model of the brain. Now, I don't know about you, but I never got any training in the brain or neuroscience and any of the leadership or CI programs that I ever did. And it's actually a misnomer that we're thinking beings who sometimes feel. We're actually feeling beings who can sometimes think. And if you think of continuous improvement and problem solving and creativity and innovation, all of those things require us to be doing our very best thinking, and they need us to be operating out of the executive part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex. But because all our experience is processed from the bottom up, to get to that top, to the smart part of our brain, we have to go through the lower, not so smart part of our brain. And when we're alarmed, we can lose up to 40 points on our IQ. And if we're in that fight or flight, that state of fear, that goes all the way up to 50 points on our IQ. I don't know about you, but I can afford to lose 50 points on my IQ. And if you add that up across all of the organization, that's a huge loss. So not only does it impact on our thinking, but we're also biologically hardwired for belonging. And when we feel that we don't belong, we feel that in the same way that we do physical pain. So we're either creating an environment where people are included and feel that they can thrive, or people are excluded and they feel hurt and they feel that physically and emotionally at the same time. Thanks, Chris. So what we want to just show you a little bit here is what we've created and what we've called the Y care model. So you'll see it's an orb, it's a circle, and it's divided into two hemispheres, if you like. On the left hand side, there's the VUCA external environment that Chris has already talked about, and how that change has increased exponentially. And they say that the change has never been so fast, and it's never going to be so slow again. So that's only going to speed up and keep going as we move forward. And then everything on the right hand side is internal to the organization. And you'll see right at the heart of it are thriving individuals, and a little bit like all of us should have a really strong core. You know, you hear that from all of the yoga and Pilates, that, you know, if we want to stay healthy, we need to have a strong core. So too does the organization need to have a strong core, and that comes from creating the environment where individuals can thrive. And once we create that environment where individuals can thrive, they provide the organization with that agility and energy to prosper. And it works, as Chris said, in tandem and co-creation with all of the different levels, with the team level, with the leader level, and with the organizational level. And they work synergistically to create that thriving culture of continuous improvement, which is the bottom half of the internal side then. And linking those two halves then are the foundational levels of understanding the brain and neuroscience, and then really importantly as well, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And just like a house needs really strong foundations, they also need those as really strong foundations before we're able to proceed. So we've talked about psychological well-being, and what do we mean by that, and why does it matter? So well-being has started to come much more forefront in the news, and we saw from the brain how much that matters to be able to think. But we have to be really intentional about this. It can't be something that we do haphazardly or occasionally. It needs to be something that we build into the system of work. And I know some of the leaders that I have worked with have said, I'm not really comfortable talking about feelings, and is this really appropriate to work? And we would challenge that and say, if something isn't impacting your ability to do your job, then that conversation is relevant to work. And you'll see as we start to move through this little diagram, how when we manage psychological well-being, we're able to unlock what is called psychological capacity. And what we mean by that is where you've got the emotional and cognitive energy, and you feel safe, you can be open, you can be curious, and you can do your really best thinking and be able to go that extra mile to want to put in that discretionary effort. And all of that then goes through to being able to use that within the improvement system. So we're able to bring all of our best thinking, not just to the jobs that we do, but also to improving those jobs. And the consequence of that is that we're able to improve performance and to be able to manage that change. But also we're able to create environments where individuals thrive. So the two go hand in hand, a little bit like the strands of DNA. Thriving individuals create thriving cultures of continuous improvement, but thriving cultures of continuous improvement create the environment to nurture the environment for individuals to thrive as well. So they're two halves of the same. So we said we need to be intentional about managing psychological well-being. So what might that look like? So one of the things we've been really careful in the book not to do is to not be prescriptive about things. We've provided lots of frameworks and suggestions, but there's no one size fits all for this, because each of us is unique. You know, a little bit like each of us has a different fingerprint. Each of us has different needs around our psychological well-being, and that changes for each of us on a daily basis as well. This isn't fixed. It fluctuates based on both us and the external circumstances which we find ourselves in. And you can see in the middle here we've defined the 10 elements of psychological well-being, and they're a combination of both personal and workplace factors, and they fall into 3 categories. There's the foundational ones, the relational ones, and then finally the developmental ones. And the idea is that, you know, that this works best, and the example here is shown between an individual and a leader, when you've got that partner to help you to manage those areas of psychological well-being. And the Gemba is a fantastic opportunity to demonstrate that humble leadership, and for that to be an opportunity to connect. So we talk about Gemba as look, listen, and learn, but with that relational piece, and where the leader spends a lot of time listening and truly coaching the individual to help them to see where they already got really good areas of strength that they could amplify, and to help them to see where else they might want to work on, to develop, and what would help them to create the conditions for them to thrive. Thanks, Chris. So not only are leaders really important and critical to psychological well-being, but teams are as well. So what efficiency was to the industrial era, relationships are to the present era. And we talk about the team managing psychosocial hazards. And those workplace hazards really fall into 2 categories. The first is around job design and the work environment, and the second is around social and behavioural factors. And all of the things that are in the job design component are things that you'll be really familiar with. All of the things around roles and responsibilities, communications, workload planning and scheduling. And the social and behavioural factors then are about the social and physical isolation. So feelings of loneliness are hugely impacting on people's well-being, and then that interpersonal relationship piece as well. And that comes together to create the team's collective psychological capacity. And that isn't just a sum of all of the individuals' psychological capacity within the team. The team as a collective, as a unit, has the ability to amplify that, to multiply it, if you like, from a positive sense, or to take it all the way down from a negative sense. And just as at an individual level, that psychological capacity, that cognitive and emotional energy, and that discretionary effort and the wanting to go an extra mile impacts on the individual CI, exactly the same thing happens, and impacts on the health of the team CI system, which then consequently impacts on the team's performance then as well.
So thank you. Great summary there. Thank you very much. I see, I should have said at the beginning, we will take questions at the end. I see a couple of people starting putting questions in the chat and the Q&A, so we're not ignoring those, but we'll just we've allowed time at the end to run through those. So as Caroline said, psychological capacity impacts continuous improvement, and we were trying to think how to show this. And because it's so many things involved, and Chris, our co-author, came up with this model, and so all these things: team coaching, trust, continuous improvement, problem solving. So we can think about them as gears, and they actually have to mesh together and work in a coordinated way. And what is it that oils those gears? Well, it's actually the behaviours and ideal behaviours. Now, Shingo teaches us that ideal results require ideal behaviours, and we thought we'd use that to get us to think about how critical ideal behaviours are to ensure we've got psychological well-being. And also that we need to proactively manage that and ensure that we have a psychological health and safety system, and that has been co-designed, co-created with the continuous improvement system. Now, I've been working in continuous improvement for many, many years. And I honestly, until we started writing this book, I can honestly say, well, I never considered how are we thinking about psychological well-being and the design of the continuous improvement system. And I think that was a huge insight when we started putting this together. Because the chances of the continuous improvement system realizing its full potential are non-existent unless we take into account psychological well-being and make sure the two systems support each other. So something that we'll ask you a little poll on at the end of the session. This is what we came up with as an overall picture for implementation. You can see that we've got the VUCA coming into the organization. We've got the foundations at this side, on the left-hand side, how the brain works, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, all critical to understand and make sure we address. And then through a constant plan, do, check, act cycle, what we're doing is integrating the psychological health and safety system with the continuous improvement system to create that environment of psychological safety, which gives us psychological capacity. And one of the key tools that we recommend and actually give some templates for people to have a go at are what we call thriving plans. And the thriving plans look at individual level, team level, also for leaders and also for the organization. Each slightly different, but through the same structure. And the idea is that these are things that we can do on our own. There are things that we can do with people we trust. And they help us to identify what help do we need or what areas do we want to work on for development. And all of that will help to create this emotional and cognitive energy and capacity to create this thriving improvement culture where people thrive and the organization thrives. So I think we'll just have one last slide to share here, and then we'll open up for questions. So some links, we're going to send this presentation out to everyone after the session. There are some links to pre-order the book on Amazon and on the publisher Routledge. Caroline and myself will be in Orlando at the Shingle Conference and doing a 4-hour workshop on why care. It'll be fantastic to see anyone who can make that event on the 9th of May. It might be, sorry, the 8th of May. And finally, I'll just leave you with this thought here. Every individual deserves a great place to work where they can thrive. And that's what we hope this book will help people to create. Thank you. I think Mary's just got 2 polls she's going to share with you. And while people are filling those in, we're happy to take some questions.
Hopefully you're seeing that poll now.
Yes, thanks, Mary. It's come up for me anyway.
Perfect. I thank you so much, both Caroline and Chris. It was excellent. I do want to make one point about the workshop in Orlando. As a participant of the webinar or later listening to the podcast, we're giving a special discount to attendees. If you enter the code WHYCARE, all lowercase, one word, into the registration, you'll receive an extra 10% off of the workshop. So hopefully that will encourage you to attend and learn more about this. It's just excellent.
Thank you.
We do have some time for questions. So if you want to go ahead and ask your questions in the Q&A, and we'll look at those and get them answered.
There's a couple come up already, so I'll take those while I've just had a quick look. Robert asked us, was the study a global cross-industry study? Absolutely, it wasn't ours. It's public information. There's a full reference on the slide, which you'll see when we send the pack out. But it's a very detailed, in-depth study covering thousands of people. And where do we purchase the book in Canada? That's a really good question. I think you can just order it off the Routledge website, even if you're in Canada. And is there an Amazon Canada? I assume there must be. It will be on. It'll be on there as well. Apologies, we haven't put a link on that one. What else have we got? Chat. We are seeing more and more business open to cultural interventions, which is evidence of a wider shift in company cultures. That's fantastic to hear. The last few slides are speaking to me incredible work. Well, thank you very much. That's very nice. Have the panel found any particular culture models helpful to run continuous improvement activities? We use the Rossetti Culture Design Canvas, which we find highly effective to include psychological health and safety. Great input. Caroline, you think of any others that would be helpful?
There's several different ones that you can use. I think the really good thing is to use any of them as a framework to start the conversations. I think all of those things, it's about starting the conversations and involving as many people as possible, so that the solutions are co-created, and they're about giving power to and power with, and doing things with people rather than to folks. So absolutely, if people have any things that they've found useful, that would be great to share with the community, and I think all those things are really helpful.
Yeah, that's a really great point. We've put lots of frameworks and self-assessments that people can do, but we've deliberately not said here's a magic answer, because there isn't. It is about deeply understanding the individuals and putting systems in place that help us to do that, and then responding as appropriate. Can you define the CI system within which positive psychological well-being should exist? I can have a go. It should be a system which takes into account the psychological capacity that people have. So what I mean by that is, are we creating an environment where people are feeling safe to contribute, where we understand the other things that might be putting pressure on them or sucking up capacity? And the key, as Caroline said, is that they're involved in co-creating that system and co-creating how they contribute to it, rather than it being something they've told they've got to do. This is so the opposite of what we want in a good CI system would be, this is what you've got to do, this is when you've got to do it, this is how you do it, and everything's dictated. It's got to have some allowance for people to being able to genuinely contribute. Do you want to add anything to that, Karen?
I think we saw, Chris, didn't we, about the importance of autonomy. So much like anybody who's ever tried to deal with a 2-year-old at the supermarket, that desire for autonomy doesn't leave us as we get older. I think we hopefully get a little bit more sophisticated in how we express that, but that desire for autonomy stays. So some of the lean CI systems that have become very restrictive, people almost rail against those, and it's how do you create freedom within a framework to allow for that autonomy at individual and team level to meet the needs of the teams and their customers then.
That's a great point. I forgot to mention that freedom in the framework, I think, is a critical aspect. So we want to make the framework as wide as possible. We can't have complete anarchy where people can do anything they like. We want to give people as much autonomy as we can, so they feel ownership of any improvement activity, or even ownership of the day-to-day activities. Thanks, Caroline. So there's lots of stuff coming through. I'll just read a couple more coming out. Interestingly, we've had strong uptake on the umbrella business architecture to allow culture represented with equity to processing digitomes. Very interesting. So it's great to hear there's all these different things that are being tried and people are looking at these things. What can be done with individual business owners who prefer autonomy in decisions and aren't interested in being held accountable for their behaviors? Good question. I could try and encourage them to read the book, but actually, I think it's important to start having some open conversations about behaviors within those environments in terms of, you know, what no person can do everything in a business. And what happens if you create that dependency on yourself? You just get overburdened, overloaded, and ultimately start making pretty poor decisions. So actually, what can be done with individual business owners is help them to see the potential in their people. You know, a lot of time business owners fall in the trap of thinking only they know how to do something because they've grown it and it's their baby. But actually, the challenge, the opportunity is to realize that everybody comes to do a great job. And our real role as leaders is how do we help them to do that great job? And that's not by telling them what to do. Any case studies available from organizations that have purposely built psychological wellbeing systems and CI systems together in the book. There are not detailed case studies that we consider complete. There are lots of examples of organizations that have done parts of this. We've got probably the nearest one we would say is very close to doing lots of this would be O.C. Tanner. And Gary Peterson of O.C. Tanner has actually written a foreword for the book. And we've got lots of references to some of the great work that O.C. Tanner have done throughout the book.
All right. Well, that is all that we have time for today. Once again, thanks so much, Caroline and Chris. Really great stuff. And I hope you all that attended today, make sure go out and buy a copy and learn more and come to the conference. We would love to see you there. We would love to help you learn on your journey. So thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone.